It is just a huge honor today to be podcast interviewing Thad Miller. He is the founder of DDS Match and DDS Match franchise, which is operational in 39 states. Thad is a dental industry leader with 24 years experience. His circles of influence span across the United States and include practicing dentists, dental schools, manufacturers, suppliers, and beyond. Over the years, he saw firsthand the difficulty dentists had when it came time to buy and sell a practice or find a partner for the practice. He wondered, could there be a better way? What if the process could be professional, streamlined, and efficient? Utilizing technology, yet never losing the human touch, these questions led him to found DDS Match in 2009 and DDS Match franchise in 2015. Miller brings to DDS Match vast expertise in management, serving as operations manager for a national dental financial advisory firm, responsible for marketing, partnerships, and assisting dentists with practice transitions. He gained an intimate knowledge of the specific financial considerations dentists must take into account. Prior to that, Miller served as general manager for Patterson Dental Indianapolis branch, where now the president is Eric Shirley, where he was responsible for $30 million in revenue, operations, budgeting, and marketing the dental distribution business to more than 2,000 clients. He is vice president, active board member of the Dental Lifetime Network, and is president of the board of directors of the Indiana Golf Foundation, the First Tee of Central Indiana, and a member of the board of advisors of the Indiana University Student Foundation. He's a 1994 graduate of Indiana State because he couldn't get accepted to Ball State with David Letterman because he didn't have a big gap between his teeth. So since he didn't have a diastema, he had to go to the other one. Was that a good joke, or was that just totally bad?
That's not bad. It was Indiana, not Indiana State. That's where Larry Bird went, Indiana State. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah. Well, David Letterman went to Ball State, right?
Right. But you said Indiana State.
Oh, I did? Okay. I love David Letterman. I think he's just the best.
He's still got.
And now you live in Carmel, Indiana, with his wife, Paige, and 3 sons, Jack, Parker, and Charlie. My gosh. Now, I can already tell they're going to have to learn how to golf to be your son.
Absolutely.
Are they?
Yeah. They got to move out. Right.
You know, my funniest golf story is we had this McMansion right next to the clubhouse, right? And we're up on the side of this hill. You can see the whole 18-hole hills and all this kind of stuff. And my kids, they don't even talk, now that they're 30, 28, 26, 24, they don't even talk about the golf course. What they talk about is every Friday or Saturday night they had a wedding going on. And my kids were little, and no one looks at little kids, and they would just sneak over there and go to the pastries and the cookies, and it'd always be one kid comes back in, and he'd have a whole bag of food, and the other 3'd run out the door. But I couldn't believe it. In the 10 years when they were babies, now when they got teenagers, they didn't do it. But when they were babies, no, I said, well, did anybody stop you? Did anybody ask, like, are you with the bride or the they're kids running around, so no one even looks at them. But
the original wedding crashers. Right?
Oh my gosh! And you could hear the music and all this stuff. Crazy. So the reason and by the way, I'm really honored to get you on the show today because something really is strange on Dental Town. So we launched St. Patrick's Day '99, and we launched one of the first big features was free classified ads, and from '99 to today, or until the pandemic, there was usually about 1,000 classified ads of a dentist selling their practice and about 5,000 ads of dentists looking for an associate. Now it's 2,000 dentists selling their practice with only 1,000 jobs. And it kind of looks to me like a lot of 60-year-old people are looking at all this baloney going on and thinking, I'm not going to get UV lights and I'm just going to sell my practice and go. And then at the other end, at 2000, the 2020 graduates of the COVID class of 2000, they were, just February, they thought they'd come out to 5,000 classified ads on Dental Town, and those shrunk to 1,000. So are you, and I don't know who would be a bigger expert on dental transitions than you, of DDS Match and the DDS Match franchise in 39 states. Are you seeing an increase of older people that are just saying, forget it, I'm throwing it in the towel, I'm just going to sell? And are you seeing that or not really?
Yeah, definitely our conversations are up in regards to that. Just having to deal with the changes and the evolution of what it looks like to treat a patient in this era. but I think that, right now the dentists are focused on going back and treating those patients in these new restrictions to some degree, and they're busier than ever. I don't know if you've heard that. I mean, I'd say most of our clients had an incredible June and it looks, good going on. But I think part of that is that PPP loan forgiveness, right? They've got to go back, they've got to work. There's a period of time where if they're going to get part of that loan back or all of that loan back, they've got to open back up, and they've got to prove that they have staff and all the different things in regards to the PPP, because most dentists qualified and took advantage of that PPP. But what I will say, there are fewer associate opportunities because of the pandemic, but that could change. I mean, obviously, when dentists do very well, there's more opportunity for associateships. When it starts to retract, there's fewer opportunities for associateships. But
so
as far
when
as
does that PPP payroll protection plan loan forgiveness, you had to bring your staff back and keep them employed for a certain period of time? Do you know when that time ends?
it's kind of a moving target right now. We actually, with my 28 professionals I work with, we actually had a specialist on Monday. We have a Monday call every Monday, and we talk about what's going on in the industry and what's going on. It's still a little bit of a moving target on timing, so I can't say specifically, but obviously, their goal is to get back working so they can have some of that forgiven by the government.
So there's so many things I want to talk about, but what I like to do is I like to call my friends before I podcast someone to see what they think. And so when I say I call my friends, we're just talking about dentists in Phoenix that are alcoholics. And I said I was talking to you. They said it seems like they all came to the question is who's better to sell to? Should I sell my practice to a DSO or should I sell it to a young kid? That was like 4 out of 5 people said that.
Sure.
Do you get that a lot?
Sure. We do, and the way we work for the seller only. We don't do dual representation. We encourage our buyers that come to us through our website, DDS Match, to create a profile, search for opportunities. But ideally, we want them to be paired up with a good dental CPA, an attorney that's got experience in transactions, either nationwide or locally. All of my colleagues, the professionals I work with, they have relationships in every area, in their area, so they can actually work with these individual buyers and banks. If it's national banks, if it's regional banks, or if it's local banks, we do a lot of that in our process. But ultimately, for the seller, it's really what they want. They're in total control of the relationship. And our job is to find the opportunity and to put it in front of them, because, every opportunity has its positives and its negatives. They're, theoretically, if they want to retire quickly, if they want to be out in a year, a DSO is probably not a good fit. The DSO is going to want them to be there for 3 to 5 years. And I've heard that number has increased, the number of years that they want a commitment to stay in the practice. For dentists that want to transition quickly, maybe it's probably an individual, and we work with both. And I'd say predominantly our transactions are individual young buyers. They're looking for their first practice, and they've 2 to 8 years experience, and they've got the chops, and they've got the ability to do it, and we're there to connect them to good advisors to help them discern what's the right fit for them.
Okay, just a little clarification. Most of the people that listen to me are under 30. I think a quarter of our research shows a quarter of them are still in dental school, and the other 75% are under 30. When I get an email, howard@dentaltown.com, or a question in the comments on YouTube, it's always kids. So a lot of that just went over their head. But they need to know. You said you work for the seller and you represent the seller. There's another firm, and I'm not going to mention their name because it'll get back to Alan F. Thornburg, who founded AFCO, where he didn't believe, he believed in dual representation. He said, man, if you got someone representing the seller and someone representing the buyer, you'll never get a deal done. So come to me, and I'm going to represent the buyer and the seller. Do you believe that? Do you believe that you can represent the buyer or seller, or do you think the buyer needs to have a representative and the seller needs to have a representative?
I think the buyer needs a representative, the seller needs a representative. I mean, you can't do it in a legal transaction. You can't do it in a real estate transaction. Dual
Right.
representation isn't usually
I mean,
accepted.
just think of it,
Yeah.
kids. I mean, I'm selling my practice. I want to get $1 for it. You're buying it. You want to pay 1 penny. I mean, where's the give? Are we just going to drop to 50%? So you don't believe in dual representation, and neither do most attorneys, right?
No, not at all.
Yeah. Okay. And then I want to go back and just questions because the pandemic changed everything. A lot of people, when they can't find a job, they say, "Well, I want to buy a practice," but then they hear that the banks, like Bank of America or Wells Fargo, are going to say, "Well, you need a year's experience." So then their next smart question is, "Well, then should I just find a practice where the owner will carry or the owner will co-sign?" They don't have a dad that co-signed or a mom. They got $400,000 student loans, and the big banks that are telling the graduates who just walked out of school in May, and this is July 15th, that you need at least a year's experience before they'll even talk to you. So should that person just try to find a year's experience or try to find an owner carry or an owner co-signer? And what percent of your deals will the seller co-sign or carry the note? Or is that a non-existent thing?
Yeah, it's pretty non-existent. Honestly, the only time we have any seller note is if there's real estate involved, maybe a portion of the down payment on the real estate, because that requires a good amount of cash, 15 to 20% on the real estate, if the dentist owns the real estate and they're selling it. But honestly, I got to think from what I've heard, most dentists are employed. Even in the pandemic, even in the recession, I started this business in the recession in 2009. There's opportunities out there for them to work. It may not be ideal, but the banks in their communication with me, they're not as concerned about the debt as they are with the speed of the dentist keeping up with a practice, being able to do the procedures that the selling dentist has. And if they work for a year, that usually gets them over the hump to where they can keep up with a hygiene schedule. They can do the restorative and be able to keep up with the schedule. That's their biggest concern. It's not necessarily the debt as much as it is the speed. So if they can find anything, it's going to be good. It doesn't have to be, private practice. It could be a clinic. It could be any type of scenario where they're doing dentistry and they're picking up their speed from when they graduated dental school.
So you started in 2008?
Yeah.
Holy moly, that was bad timing, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So how does this look to 2008? A lot the kids the kids just walked out of dental school a couple months ago. They were only 15 years old in 2008. How does this economic contraction in 2020 look like compared to the Lehman's Day bankruptcy in 2008?
Yeah, well, I feel like it's very different in the fact that, 2008, 2009 was really more of a banking crisis. And, people theoretically couldn't get money, and then their value of their home, which was their biggest asset, is actually not worth anywhere near where it was. We're not seeing much of that in this new economy. Obviously, we've got there's tremendous challenges with COVID and employment and all kinds of things. But based on the reaction of the clients I've talked to and dentists across the country, and my, patients are coming back. And, I say that, patients are used to seeing dentists in a mask and gloves, right? I mean, they expect that. They expect a sterile environment. So it's not alarming when they have a hygiene appointment or a doctor's appointment, they're going to go to it. Now, it's a little alarming when you go to your favorite steak place and the maitre d's in a mask and, gloves and things, that's different. But, ever since the AIDS epidemic, dentists have been in sterile environments, and obviously in this new wave, they've taken it even to another level with sterile environments. And I'm pretty proud of the dentist profession of responding the way they have, because I'm hearing great things, and even the most compromised patients are showing up to practices. I don't know if you're hearing the same thing, Howard, but I mean, most dentists I'm talking to are very busy. And obviously, consumer confidence has a lot to do with dentistry, with people choosing to have a crown over a filling or something like that. Consumer confidence is a big driver I've seen. But, it's still too early to say. But since we shut down pretty early in my area and opened up pretty early. So they were down for about a month and a half. And so my dentists have about 2 months where they've been in the practice, and we're seeing really good results. And not all of them. There's some that are a little bit behind, but much better than they ever thought. And when it comes to, like, you were getting back to your original question about lending and so forth, dentists are an incredible. They're looked at by banks highly favorable because they cash flow. Most dental practices cash flow very well. And, a bank can look into the future and see the number of patients that are scheduled to be there, and hygiene and repeated revenues. And thanks to, good practice software like EagleSoft, Dentrix, PracticeWorks, all of those, you can really dive into the asset of what's going on in the practice. So it gives a lot of hope to a bank to lend money on a practice. So practice lending hasn't been an issue. Even back in 2009 when I started, practice lending wasn't a problem as long as the practice produced enough income to generate, enough income to pay the debt service and have the dentist make a living off of it.
Well, I mean, I've been saying it all day where there's an embezzlement that makes the newspaper, at least every other month in dentistry. And of course, we had one yesterday, and I post them all to keep dentists reminding. But here's a West Virginia dental office financial coordinator pleads guilty to bank fraud for depositing $120,000 of insurance checks. Only in dentistry could an employee steal $120,000 and you don't even know it. Could that happen in a pizza parlor or a Chinese restaurant in downtown Indianapolis? I mean, you're in a lucrative industry when someone can steal 120 grand and you're like, what? Really?
Yeah.
How'd that happen? God, dentistry is just crazy good business. So are you pretty busy right now? How is your world post-pandemic now, from when the World Health Organization declared this March 11 to now July versus the time before that? How is your world different now?
Sure. So before it, we were extremely busy. We start a new year. It's funny, a lot of our conversations with dentists happen between January 1st and April 15th. That's when a lot of dentists are coming to us saying, hey, I talked to my advisor, I talked to, my spouse, and I'm ready. I'm financially ready to retire. Let's talk about transitioning. Let's talk about what this looks like. And, as a company, we're at 28 professionals in 39 states now, but, we were in really good shape. And then, everything went on ice, from about St. Patrick's Day, your anniversary of starting this, right, to probably, obviously, 1st of June type area. All of my transactions were just sitting still. A couple of them went away, not for good, because when we work with a client, they're our client until we transition their practice, or obviously they stop working with us. But I had 2 closings in the last 3 weeks. So 2 practices that closed, and they have new owners. So we're back to closing. We're back to, the activity every week gets even better as far as talking to interested buyers that are wanting opportunities. There's a number of buyers that, didn't like the way they were treated during the pandemic by their employer. Maybe they were say 3 dentists in an office, and they said, okay, one of you is going to come in, the other 2 need to stay home, and you're not going to be able to make any money. Only one treated the emergencies and the other 2 stayed home. So I think that's a little bit of a wake-up call for dentists when they feel secure as employees in a practice. They feel that security of being an employee, but obviously they don't have really that much control because the owner has the control. So it's pushed some of them to consider owning a practice rather than continuing to be an employee.
Do you think we're going to have another shutdown? And I'm only talking about dental offices. I don't care about bars and tanning salons and work.
Mm-hmm.
When they said they were going to close down the workout facilities, I mean, that doesn't even apply to my lifetime. But do you think that they're going to close down dental offices again before the end of the year?
I sure hope not. In the last week, there's been a lot of communication about the vaccine by the end of the year, and from multiple different areas. And I don't think they're going to say that they may have a vaccine by the end of the year if they weren't sure of it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't, obviously, I think it's by the reaction of the patients to the dentist offices. I think that tells a story that, dentists are, an essential business, that people still go to the dentist. I mean, my wife and I haven't been to a restaurant for dinner, sit down dinner, since March, right? So I don't see that as essential, but I've been to the dentist, I've been to the physician, my attorney's available. So, if there are shutdowns, I hope they look at it from a sector rather than a full umbrella of everybody.
I know it's crazy. I graduated from high school at the birth of the AIDS epidemic.
Sure.
And when I walked into high school, all the dentists I knew in Wichita, Kansas, no one wore gloves. Half of them still stood up when they worked on the patient. It was still stand-up dentistry. And then when I got to dental school, they made us wear gloves in the lab because they saw how the old guys that always touched it with their fingers, that they're like, we don't even want you to know what a handpiece feels like. And then, they got rid of the custard ord, So it's been a gradual transition where you go into a bar, they haven't been dealing with viruses. I mean, you go into a tanning salon and a hair salon. I mean, I don't even think people like you, I think people like you should just have to shave their head and look like me. You shouldn't be going to a hair salon. So I want to start this interview completely backwards. What goes wrong in a transaction? I mean, obviously you're in 39 states because you're very successful and everybody I know knows of you, loves you, trusts you, all that kind of stuff like that. So let me flip it around. What could go wrong in this? I'm selling I list my practice for $1. You buy it for $1. I'm the old seller. You're the young buyer. What could go wrong?
Well, I think the main role of a transition professional is expectations, is really, sitting down with a client and finding out what their true expectations are. And if they're not ready to transition, we tell them from the beginning, you shouldn't hire us. If they have something in mind that's not reasonable, we encourage them to continue to work. So, if everybody has reasonable expectations, buyer and seller, from the beginning, that's important. But I think when it goes wrong, Howard, is when we're starting to get to the offer stage. One of the things we do, and this is one of the things we were the first to do it, I feel, is we have a comprehensive letter of intent. We address every single thing that's going to go on in the transaction, from the price to the asset allocation for taxes. What are we doing with the real estate, the lease, the breakdown of what they're buying and what they're not buying, non-compete. Everything goes we have about a 5-page letter of intent, which was unique to the industry 9 years ago, where they usually just got a price and then they kind of thought about everything until closing. So we would rather get it all in writing ahead of time, even though a letter of intent's a non-binding agreement. We want that expectation set for our buyer because they're obviously leaving an opportunity to come do this and borrowing a lot of money, and they're changing their life and impacts their family and everybody. And then our seller is moving on from an opportunity that they've grown for 30 to 40 years, and they want to know how it plays out because they want to transition. If they see a patient in the grocery, a month after transition, they want to feel good that they don't have to hide behind, a stack of things because they didn't have a good transition. The patients might be frustrated. I'd say most dentists really care about who they sell it to, and our goal is to find that match. That's why we call it DDS Match. For them, for their patients, for their staff, people they've worked with forever, and that's our goal. So expectations is the main thing.
I'm trying to think of the dental CPA, my buddy dental CPA in your backyard that you're friends with.
Cam McQuay?
Oh, that's who it is.
Yeah. So when I started, I went to Cam. We were friends because
how do you spell his name? K-A-M?
K-A-M McQuay, M-C-Q-U-A-Y.
That's it.
So I went to Cam when I started with this idea, and I said, I don't know how to value a dental practice. I don't have a clue. I'm a business person. But he has a team of people that do business valuations for all types of businesses, for restaurants, for fertilizer stores, dental practices, hospitals, large transactions, small transactions. So They do all of our business valuations for all the DDS Match professionals across the country. So they're obviously they've been doing this for a while, but they also now have a robust file of different types of transitions in all types of states and scenarios. So they've been a great partner.
Wow. God, I have so many questions to ask you. I think it's humans are tribal. All animals are tribal. I mean, they're tribal. You know, I got 4 dogs. You open the door and they run out and they pee on each 4 corners. You know, they're marking their territory. It's always marked. I notice in dental school when they're really young and they start thinking about buying a practice, their mind immediately goes to I'm owning the land and the building, and when I pull it in my dental office, I'm going to pee on each 4 corners. And they seem to be obsessed in the land and the building because they're an animal. And I always tell them, you know, what's important is your business. I mean, if the best place for your business is in New York City, right, where the subway lets out, or in a high-density foot traffic, I mean, are you a dentist or a real estate agent? I always say the business of dentistry is more important, but they're really infatuated with the real estate because they're humans. My question is, if you sold 100 practices, what percent involve land and building, and what percent are just selling the business and a rent?
I'd say about 50%, but
50,
I'm,
50?
you know, and I still manage a territory in Indiana and Louisville, whereas there's a lot of dentists who own their own building. Okay. Whereas, you know, maybe our more, you know, Los Angeles, Chicago, some of the bigger cities, Atlanta, they may not own their building as much. There's a lower percentage of dentists who own their own real estate, so they lease. But you're right. I mean, you got to weigh, what does that real estate do for you? Obviously, it's great to have your own real estate because you can charge yourself rent. You can have different tax structures to take care of that ongoing. If it is a real estate sale, Howard, and the dentist who I'm working with, and a majority of our professionals have their real estate license, so we can handle the transaction of the real estate also. If they don't sell it at time of closing of the asset, we usually build in some sort of lease with the option to buy. And we've got a couple unique things we do with that to help them know that they're going to be able to buy that building. And the dentist who wants to sell that building feels good about selling it. They know they're going to be able to sell it. So, but I think it's, you know, if it's an option and it works, great. But like you said, if you can't be too pigeonholed on what you want, you got to think about it from a broad spectrum.
I turn 58 next month, and if I had to look at the trends of my 58 years on this planet, it seems like the one trend that's been drifting downward the whole time is just trust. I mean, trust of institutions. I mean, the CDC. I remember. You talk about water fluoridation, and you say, well, the CDC said. And half the people in Arizona said, well, they're just a shill for the pharmaceutical industry, you know, and all this stuff like that. And it's the same. It's selling a practice. I mean, you talk to these kids, they don't trust anybody. And they shouldn't trust anybody. So you just told me you have 1,000 patients. I don't even trust it. You said, you know, how do I know? I'm a young kid. And you're,
Right.
you know, the seller's older. You know, I got these 2 old guys that know more than me. How can I trust you?
Yeah. No, I think that's critical. And I created a process called the trusted transition process. And we use the same steps every time we work with a seller. And the goal is to get some transparency on what the buyer is actually buying. We have, again, I talked about earlier, Blue & Company does all our business valuations. So when we're analyzing a practice to sell, Blue & Company, which is a CPA firm.
And that's Cameron.
That's Cam's team. Yeah, I mean, they're a top 20 healthcare firm in the country.
Does he go by Cam instead of Cameron?
He does, but yeah, by Cam.
Okay.
And they're going to look at a practice and they're going to really get out any of the fat that's going on. Owning a business, a dentist could pay their spouse, $50,000 a year to open the mail and use that as an opportunity to build a pension fund for the spouse. Blue & Company will go in and they'll isolate all those extra things. If the dentist has a Ferrari in the practice, we're going to take that out. That's not part of the dental practice. But that's going to be in the business valuation that's 70 pages long. So the buyer can trust what they're buying, but also the buyer's advisors can trust what they're looking at. That's our goal. And we create like I said, a group around the buyer. We refer them to good buyers in our area so they can really do the due diligence that needs to get done before they buy a business. We also work with, I'm sure you know, Dr. Charles Blair.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, Dr. Blair does what's called a clinical treatment analysis report for us, and it basically shows all the opportunity in the practice. How many root canals are they doing, and if they did more, what does that lead to in production? Oral surgery, everything. So when a dentist is looking at buying a practice, if they've never done a root canal or never done one in school, and they pulled one tooth in dental school, but they still haven't done it before they buy this practice, they can look at a practice, and if it's heavily endo and oral surgery, they know this probably isn't the practice for me because I'm not going to be able to recover all of that revenue. And on the reverse, which is usually the case, our practices have a ton of opportunity because the dentist who's selling, they stopped doing root canal 15, 20 years ago, and they stopped doing oral surgery. So Charles Blair's report shows a buyer where the opportunity is. It's not me telling them. It's not the seller telling them there's opportunity. It's a trusted name in Dr. Blair who does, as you know, all the ADA coding books and fee schedules and things. So it helps tell that story. And that's, again, part of our process that we prepare for a buyer. We'll provide them with every practice report they need, financials, tax returns. It's a big decision for a buyer. And we want them and their advisors to be ready to make the right decision for their future.
Yeah, he's out of Charlotte, and Charlotte's a big. I mean, when I think of Charlotte, I think of Michael Oggins. I think of Blair. I mean, that's an amazing ground zero for dentistry. So we talked about the trusted transition process. I know this one drives you nuts, but all my dental friends, they don't need anybody like you to evaluate their practice because they got all these rules of thumbs. It's 1 year's collection. No, it's 90% of production. I mean, there's more one-liner practice valuations. Are any of them spot on, or is it a little more than a one-liner? Can I just say you can sell your practice for 1 year's collection? I mean, can you just
No.
make a blanket statement like that?
No, I honestly think that those one-liners have been driven by brokers who don't have business valuation helping them. Anybody can. We don't feel like selling a dental practice is like selling a used car. You can't just go, well, I'm going to look up in Kelley Blue Book and we think this is what we could sell it for. That's just not how it works. It's a working machine. And, it can't be sold like a house even. A real estate, real estate agents, they'll go, okay, this house was built in 1971 and the house, 2 houses down, it's sold for $400,000. And this one has marble countertops, so we should sell it for $20,000 more. We're not selling a box in a dental transaction. We're selling the assets, the relationships, what's been going on there, the profitability. I mean, you can have 2 practices that collect $1 million, one of them with 75% overhead, one with 50% overhead, and their values are drastically different. It's a lot more complex than that. These are $1 million businesses. When somebody owns a manufacturing plant that manufactures widgets, they don't just, throw a number out and try and sell it. They actually hire people to do a business valuation and sell it through business brokerage. That's what we do.
Yeah, I mean, and kids, and I'll explain it to you like this. I mean, you have 2 offices that do $1 a year in sales, and you say they're both $1, but one of the practices does $1 in sales, the owner takes home 1 penny, and the other guy does $1 in sales, and he takes home a quarter. How could they be worth the same amount of money? I mean, I don't want to do. It's the same as overhead. I've said this a million times. I want you to think of the worst dental procedure that you do all the time. That you don't really think it's very fun. For me, that is obviously a quadrant of MOD composites. There's nothing worse when you look at this schedule like, oh my God, I got to go in room 8 and do an MOD composite on 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so I always think of composites, and let's look at 4 dentists that have that make $25,000 a month in their paycheck. Well, at 50% overhead, I only had to do $50,000 of MOD composites. At 65% overhead, which is the average overhead in the United States according to the ADA, you'd have to do $71,000 of the fillings. And if your overhead was 80%, which is 20% of American dentists, you got to do $125,000 of MOD composites to make your 25 grand. I mean, when I make 25 grand, I want to do it in as short a time as possible. I just can't imagine. So that's why practice valuation is real. And then you got other things where some people are telling you their overhead based on what they charged out. Well, I charged $1,000 for a crown. Okay, but Delta Dental only paid you $650, so they adjusted that down $350. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's us. On Dental Town, a lot of people are they're seeing that alphabet soup behind the name. Somebody will say something, and behind their name they got a CPA. We know what that is, Certified Public Accountant. But you're starting to see more like your buddy Cam with the ABV behind his name, the CVA behind his name. Explain what the ABV, the CVA, and is that really something they should be looking for, or?
Yeah, I think it's important. Certified Valuation Analyst is an additional amount, and that's the CVA, additional amount of education on top of being a CPA. Cam has a team. I mean, I think they have 25 CVAs that work for Blue & Company that do valuations of, like I said, dental practices, companies, hospitals, all types of things. But these people, they don't do tax returns. Okay. I mean, Blue has their own tax department. They have an advisory department, but this is their business valuation department. And this is all they do. They value businesses. It's kind of like when you hear that, T-Mobile and Sprint are merging. Somebody did a valuation on those companies to come up with, that merger. I mean, that's a much bigger transaction, obviously, than a dental transaction, but, it's real and they should be done. And dental practices deserve that if they're looking to transition.
Nice. So is Cam pretty busy right now? I mean,
yeah, he and his team are. Yeah, I mean, I think it obviously slowed a bit during the pandemic, and they obviously went remote. They're all working remote, but it sounds like by the end of the month they'll all be back in office. But they've been keeping up with us pretty well, and we're continuing to grow. I mean, I'm adding 5 to 6 people a year to our team. So the more we add, the more they do, and it just grows from there.
You know how many people work for me?
How many?
About half. So I want to just talk about, I don't do what you do. I mean, if I have a dream in the middle of the night about dentistry, it usually has something to do with extracting a wisdom tooth, doing a molar endo. It's not, practice valuations, but I want you to rant to this. I've seen great deals where a guy buys a dental practice who just did, he did basic anterior endo, he did crown and bridge fillings, he had a hygienist, but he referred out about, $50,000 a year of molar endo, or maybe $50,000 a year of wisdom teeth. And the new buyer could do that. So he got the existing business. You did $1 worth of dentistry a year, sell it to me for $1, got that. But I did another 50 cents of dentistry that you were sending out. And so I'm wondering, do you track all the dentistry that in your valuation of everything they're referring out? Because what if I'm a young girl? Because sure. I do see a big difference in girls and guys. I know this sounds terrible, but it's just Dentistry Uncensored and honest. When I was little, all the OBGYNs were men, and now they're all girls. I'm sorry, but every dental school I walk into, the pediatric dental residents, 5 out of 6 are girls. And I saw with my own 4 boys, they always came to daddy, but if they fell down and needed a boo-boo, they'd run right around me to mom, right? And right. And I would rather go to hell than be a pediatric dentist. I mean, if those are my choices, just throwing off the Empire State Building, land in hell, or be a pediatric dentist, I would dive head first. So do you see that hidden value thing a big deal?
Absolutely, and that's one of the reasons I got in touch with Charles to do this CTA. Yeah, that's part of our process.
CTA.
Yeah, the clinical treatment assessment. So
Okay.
basically, the analyzer, clinical treatment analyzer, it shows where that opportunity is. So yeah, if they can add that service to the practice, that's huge. And the blue valuation
Clinical treatment, CT
analysis.
analysis. Because,
Mhm.
like I say, I can name two girls now that hit a gold mine because the old man dentist referred out
Right,
all pediatric
right,
dentistry for
right,
40 years.
right. Well, and we want to show it and dollarize it, and by Charles doing that, like you're asking about trust, I mean, we feel like we grow in trust when we show the analysis reports to what's actually going on here. It's not just an opinion. And the valuation isn't done on potential, it's done on what's been happening. So we don't beef the number because we think that, there's a ton of endo here or a ton of pediatric. The business valuation is on what's going on right now and what's been going on in the last 12 to 36 months.
Nice, nice, nice. So how do you match? So you have DDS Match,
Mhm.
and everyone listening to me is thinking, is he trying to say Match.com? No, this isn't looking a date match. Man, you're very close. DDS Match, date match, Match.com. Are you the Match.com of dentistry? Is that what we're talking about?
I guess so. I don't know, but yeah, it's a service where anybody can create a profile. As I mentioned before, we don't charge buyers anything. We just ask them to sign a confidentiality agreement. Um, but if they go to DDS Match, they can create their own profile confidentially, and then once they're logged in, they can get a lot more details on the practices that we represent across the country. We actually have uh, and we have algorithm in there where if they pick on certain cities that they're interested in, even if they're broad across the country, whenever we post an opportunity in that city, they'll get notified that there's a new opportunity in one of the cities they're interested in. So, even if they're a second year dental student and they know they're going to be working somewhere in the future, this is a great way to stay in touch with different opportunities. And we've got thousands of dentists on the site. It allows us to stay in touch with them as we continue to add opportunities.
Okay, you got two websites. You got DDS Match. I think everything you were saying was DDS Match. And the other
Mm-hmm.
one is DDS Match Franchise. So the DDS Match is if you're a dentist buying or selling a dental office, and you can go there and set up your profile for free.
Yes, free.
And then, because I tried to set mine up and it said you did not pass the background check, go away. And then the other one is DDS Match Franchise. That's for practice transition brokers or someone who's thinking about getting into the biz.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So if my homie goes to DDS Match, what are they going to find?
They're going to find a number of practices all over the country that are available for associateships or for sale or merger or partnerships. And they can search by location, by size of practice, whatever it may be. If they just go there, they're just going to get a little bit of detail in the practice. They're going to get, how many operatories there are, what the revenue is, the general location. But if they create a profile for free and agree to the confidentiality agreement, they'll get a login, and then they can go in and look deeper into what's going on in the practice, how many staff there are, if they have digital radiography, if they don't, if they have cone beam, CEREC, what's the local area like. It's all confidential. There are no doctors' names public on the site. Those are all protected behind, for our professionals to know and stay in touch with. But they can build a cart just like if they're ordering on Amazon. They can pick on 3, 4, 5 practices under their login, and it sends a note to all of my professionals to follow up and talk more about the opportunity, and then we can share additional data, be it practice reports, the business valuation, clinical treatment analysis, whatever it may be, as they consider, buying a practice.
And I want you to put your real estate hat on. People have humans are very good at disconnect. A social disconnect. They really want a swimming pool, so they convince themselves that, well, we put in a swimming pool, it'll increase the value of our house. and we'll get all of our money back for free. And then the real estate agents in Phoenix, Arizona said, no, that's really not how it works. And then, so the older dentists are like, well, I want to sell my practice. I'm getting to be 60. I want to sell my practice. What do I need to do to sell a practice? Should I add a digital x-rays? Obviously you wouldn't put a swimming pool in a dental office trying to sell it, but are there things that you really believe if you upgrade your practice with this dollar, you will get your dollar back out at the sell? And
Sure.
it might make it easier to sell. Do you think there's things like that?
Well, I think it's important to be, um, I think it's important to be marketable. So, just simple things. Just like if you got to look at it like selling a house to some degree, right? I mean, it doesn't cost that much to update your landscaping, right? Even though you don't want to do it, you've gotten used to the old yews out front and the tree that's half dead. People start updating their landscaping when they look to sell. I think they need to look at a practice needs to look at that also. They need to, obviously, it's not a bad thing to update their carpet. It's not a bad thing to, if they're not digital, they definitely need to be digital. I mean, all the buyers that I work with have been trained only on digital, not even doing films. So if they're not digital, that's critical. I had a couple clients that don't have a website. And they might think, well, why do I need a website? I don't want any new patients. Well, you need a website because the first thing any buyer that's interested in your practice is going to do is go look at your website. And I always say, even now more than ever, you need to be communicating your sterilization procedures. You need to communicate that you're doing things in your practice that keep the patient safe. So, we've got a relationship with a website company, but there's a number of them out there that we refer out to help them build a basic website. It doesn't have to be too complex. But, I think the most important thing for a buyer to look at when they're going through this process is if they can connect with the seller. I think it's critical because, our professionals sit in on these meetings with buyers and sellers after hours, and that compatibility is critical because that's really what they're buying. They're buying that dentist's relationship with their patients and their staff and their community. It's not just like buying a box or buying a home. When you buy a home, the realtor brings strangers into your home and they come up with a price, they give you a call, and they go to closing. You don't ever meet the person who owned the building. In a dental practice, you need to meet the dentist. You need to get to know them and take a couple extra meetings with their spouse and get a feel for what you're doing. It's not as transactional as maybe some people look at it. We feel like it's a transition, not a transaction.
But it depends on who you ask, though, because a lot of it is all kept secretly from the staff. So the broker knows, the dentist
Sure.
knows, his wife knows, but the staff, and sometimes the staffs they cry when they find out. I mean, they
Absolutely.
So the question I ask is, you're a transparent guy, you're above board, you got a great reputation. Why can it not be? Why does part of it have to be opaque?
Yeah, that's a great question, Howard. Yeah. When dentists ask me, I've got staff that I love, they've been with me for a long time. Should I tell them I'm selling my practice? And what I say is, um, I always say the fear of change is worse than the change that actually happens. So what I tell them is, why don't we try and find somebody that you're proud of, that you're happy with? And at that point, when we found them and we've got agreements in place, I'll go with you to tell the staff what's happening. And you speak on why you've done this, why you've hired a professional to do this, and I'll help talk them through why they should be excited about having the new dentist that's joining the team and working with you. But if you tell them now, they're going to panic. They're going to lose their job. They're going to panic that, things are going to be drastically different. And they heard a story about their friend who was a hygienist, and they came in and they locked the door. And that's not a transition. I mean, that's really not. That's a transaction. So, our goal is to find the right fit, and then we can talk the staff through what's going to change. And if they choose to leave afterwards, that's fine. But ultimately, our goal is to help them through all the steps to get them to a smooth transition. So those people can still have a job. They can still be in the community. They all know, the buyer knows what they're paid. The staff's not going to have a pay cut, or there's no, hidden things there. But I think it's critical because the buyer is leaving an opportunity elsewhere. it's got to be held confidential because you know how the dental world is. There's a lot of talk, and if if the hygienist in the selling practice tells a friend who's a hygienist in the buying practice, and the dentist finds out, and that associate's leaving, he could be unemployed, not have a job, have a house payment, and it's all because that seller's hygienist said something to the buyer's hygienist. It's not their asset to sell, it's the dentist's asset to sell. So I think it's confidential information, and it's at a high level, and we do it in a very transparent way. We give we like to give the staff and the patients and the dentist time to do this in the right way, but telling them up front usually causes more harm than good.
So when you
For the
talk to the staff, you have your Oprah hat on or your Dr. Phil hat on? Which hat do you?
I'm not sure what the difference is. I don't think I've seen Oprah in a hat.
Okay, so
But
I want to go right to the other dark horse of this whole
yeah,
industry, and that is so I'm a young whippersnapper. I'm 25. I buy old man Cialis's practice at 65, and he's got all these girls that have been with him 20 years, and
sure.
they're all 40, 50, and they won't listen to me. And they're like, man, I paid $750,000 this practice, and there's 5 ladies in there over 50 that they don't even listen to me. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, dude, you bought Coca-Cola. When these people come in, that they're part of the brand. And if you pay $1 million for a practice and then everyone's gone, I mean, you might as well just done a de novo and started from scratch. So I'm always saying, well, if you bought these relationships, well, you got to keep them for at least some time.
Right.
Where do you weigh in on that?
Well, I think it's important. Like I said, it goes back to the relationship. If the seller believes in the buyer, we help them write the letter to the patients. We help them deliver the message to the staff. And if they believe in them, I would hope that the staff would give, and the patients would give this dentist an opportunity to prove who they are with the referral and the blessing from the seller, right? If you do it right, I don't have a lot of turnover of staff after a transaction because they've endorsed them. I mean, patients, like I said, patients have to go to a new dentist anyway. Why won't they try the person who was referred by the person they trusted versus going to somebody down the street? Same with the staff. Why would they make a rash judgment to leave and go work for a dentist down the street just because the dentist is younger or different than who they'd been working for if that dentist believes that they're a best fit for their practice?
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question that was just posted today under practice. So this is under the practice transition. So practice transitions as practice acquisitions. So anyway, he says, hello, I found a practice I'd like to purchase. The current owners did a valuation based on EBITDA, but that might be a rough estimation. Do you base your valuation on EBITDA, or are there other variables that go into it? First of all, you got to explain what EBITDA is. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
EBITDA is a hot word because of the DSO integration into dentistry. They use a lot of its earnings before income taxes distributions. So they use that and a multiple from that. So if a practice's EBITDA is 500,000 net, kind of the net to the practice, they're looking to buy it at 4 or 5 times EBITDA. But essentially down the road, 4 or 5 years from now, when they want to sell it all, they can sell it at 10 times EBITDA. So they get a good return in the private equity world. Practices can be valued that way. And we do some of that for some of our larger practices, okay, if they're strictly thinking of being in the DSO market. But for our average practice, which our average practice sale is in the $600,000, $700,000 range, we're using Blue and Company for the business valuation, and they're looking at cash flow, how it's going to work from a cash flow. They also look at the market. They look at a lot of different things that goes into that 70-page report to come up with that business valuation. And, they're kind of two different animals, but you can usually get about to the same place. But, when a dentist sells in those two different ways, there's always, it's not just the price. And that's the thing that I think everybody needs to understand. It's not just the price that you get, it's what you give and what the take is in regards to the sale. So with this client, I would say the most important thing for them to do is work with an advisor that has dental experience in their market or on a nationwide basis. There's a number of people that represent buyers, and really go through what that valuation is and if it makes sense. I mean, they're going to have their own analysis that they're going to do, their own due diligence. And I encourage all buyers to do that. I don't, it doesn't bother me if a dentist, doesn't want to buy one of my practices. I don't get frustrated by that. If it didn't fit for them, that's fine. We'll find somebody else. But most important thing is I want them to choose the right practice for them so they can be successful in private practice dentistry.
The accounting is so crazy in dentistry because you take EagleSoft out of Effingham, Illinois. You take Dentrix, which is in Provo, Utah. None of them integrate with QuickBooks Pro. All the dentists, they have their practice management data, and then they have their Quicken data. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like that's why all dentists are complete schizophrenics and bipolar because they have two different management information systems. When you're trying to evaluate a practice, is that a problem for you? I mean, you got two data sets. You got a bunch of Quicken data and you got a bunch of Dentrix data. Do you I know you use a CAM. But is there a lot of dentists ask, should I buy a dashboard? And some of these dashboards they're building are extracting numbers out of your accounting and extracting numbers out of your deal and putting them together. Where do you see this? I'll give you another deal. I mean, most dentists can't even tell me at what time of the day they broke even. I'm like, are you shitting me? Because I'll look at overhead and I'll say, wow, you didn't even break even till 3. You made some money from 3 to 4. Then your 4 o'clock, your root canal billet and crown for $2,000. Said she was going to be an hour late, so the assistant rescheduled her to tomorrow. It's like, shit, you've already been here 8 hours. I would have sat here 2 more hours because that $2,500 would have been nothing but net. So, right. I mean, they just never know their numbers. Do you see this messing up their expectations, what they think their practice are? Is it a problem for you, or how do you get around this?
We get around it with evaluation. I mean, that's what Blue does for us. It takes a lot of the noise out. We can really see what's going on. Because like I said, even in a tax return, there's a lot of noise in there because they've got pension plans, they've got different things they're doing. If you work with a company like ours, Blue & Company, they do all that to get all the noise out. And they look at the practice reports, they look at the financials, their QuickBooks, they look at the tax returns. So we come up with a business valuation. And like I said, it's not just the story to the dentist, it's a story to their advisors who have similar background. And, our valuation analysts are available to buyers and their advisors to talk through why they came up with the value that they did. And, that's what's critical for us. And that makes all the difference in what we do because we can focus on the transition and, really have people trust what we're putting in front of them.
Another issue, and this is tough for them, they decide, they get out of school, they think they want to buy a practice. They always ask, well, do I first find an attorney? Do I first find, like your buddy Cam, a dental CPA? Do I find a practice broker? Where should she start on this? What's the most logical place to start? Lawyer, accountant, broker? What do you...
I think it's important to build your team, okay? And most of the people that I encourage them to work with, they'll sit down with them in advance and they won't charge them to talk about how they do things, right? They don't need them until there's an opportunity. For instance, I had a great practice this years ago, and every time anybody comes to our website, DDS Match, our professionals will connect with them and then give them a list of advisors in their area they can connect with and interview. Even if they're not ready to buy right now, they need to build their team. And how that came to play is I had a great practice that was in high demand. We had 6 or 7 people that wanted to buy this practice. And the dentist who took my advice that had a team, he sat down with the selling dentist who needed to sell. He was actually ill. He had cancer and he needed to sell, but he had a great practice and he wanted to go to the right person. The person who sat down and said, I've got an attorney in place, I've got an accountant in place, and I've got my bank financing in place. I would love to buy your practice. That's what sold my seller, my client, because it's their decision on who they choose to sell it to this dentist, because they were ready, because he knew he could move quickly. He knew he wasn't just kicking tires. He knew he was ready. So, I think it's good to get that team, even if you don't have a transaction in mind yet. And, they're all good advisors. And again, I want them to make the right decision for their family, for their future. And we feel like we give a transparent look at what the opportunity is.
Okay, I want you to put on your a 10-year hat. We're going to look at a decade. We're going to go from 30 years. We're going to go from 2010 to 2020. Last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
From 2010 to 2020, has it always been a buyer's market, a seller's market? Has it gone from buyer's market to sellers and back up? Does it oscillate? So over the 10 years, has it been a buyer's market, seller's market? And what is the market today? Is today a buyer's market? So that means it favors the person buying, or is it a seller's market, selling the old man with diabetes and high blood pressure who just wants to take all of his money and run to the nursing home?
Howard, I don't know. I mean, I hate to be vague on that, but practices are so unique. As you know, you've seen all types of practices. You've seen practices that are collecting $500,000 and they do great because they're a boutique type practice, all the way up to, $10 million practices where they got 10 people working in there. So it's really hard to say, is it a buyer or a seller's market? I just challenge, the buyers when they're looking for practices to be discerning, to really ask the questions, demand to see as much transparency as possible. And if it doesn't feel right, or if it doesn't look right, then punt. There's going to be opportunities out there. We all know that the baby boomers in our society are retiring in all different sectors, in accounting and legal and appraisers, whatever it may be. There's a large group of our population that are retiring, and there's fewer buyers. So because there's just the mass number of dentists that are transitioning over the next 10 years. So I think there's opportunity out there. Again, this is my second quote unquote recession since I started this business, since I started in a recession, and we've got something right now we're dealing with. And there are still great opportunities out there that buyers are looking into, doing their due diligence and taking advantage of.
And I think the discerning, you know why I never, ever bought a practice? Because of discerning. I mean, I wouldn't buy a practice from a dentist who'd sell it to me. It's like, if you'd sell that practice to me, you'd sell it to anybody. Same reason I wouldn't join a country club. I mean, if you take me as a member, I'm not joining your club. I want to ask you another thing. There's the biggest, one of the biggest discussions in your entire industry is urban or rural. Some people think there's way too much competition in urban. If you just go 2 miles out of town, I mean, there's people who will swear to the grave that if you can get 2 miles from an airport where a Southwest Airlines if Southwest lands there and you get 2 miles away, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Nobody will go there. The DSOs that have been on my show, I mean, I've had all the big boys on my show, and they say, we don't go to rural because we can't get workers to go there. These kids come out of school, and I get it. They look me in the eyes, and I say, drive out to Eloy. It's an hour south of Arizona. They don't even have a dentist. If you go to Pew Research started with saving the oceans. That's about 70% of their time because the ocean's 70% of the service. But healthcare is their next big thing. They have maps of where there are no dentists. I mean, it's like 11% of the counties in the Midwest don't even have a dentist. When dentists, when they show up, and I pull up the Pew website, I said, look, man, here's 2 cities in Arizona that don't have a dentist. You go there, you'll crush it. And they're like, dude, I'm single. I don't want to go sit in the middle of some nowhere. I mean, I'm trying to get married. So when someone says urban or rural, what goes through your amazing mind?
Well, it's got to fit it's got to be a match for how they want to practice too, I always get people say, well, none of these dentists want to come to my town because there's not a Nordstrom, or there's not, there's not a Starbucks or something like that. And I say, well, it's not always that. Honestly, dentists are intelligent people. and they're attracted to other intelligent people. Most of my dentists that I work with are married to other professionals. They're married to, their husband is, he's not just a banker, he's, an investment banker. Their spouse is a nurse. They're not just a nurse, they're a pediatric nurse, or a, pediatric physician. And, those jobs aren't in rural Indiana or Kentucky or, Oregon or anywhere. So, sometimes the dentist has to make a choice, can we, because they're working on dual income, which is a great scenario, right? But they gotta weigh, do we want to live near where we work, or do we need to live near your job and I drive a little bit? There's no doubt there are more profitable practices in rural parts of the states because it's a percentage of dentist per patient, correct? So, with these DSOs not setting up in these rural areas, there's less competition, right? So they just got to weigh it all. And I always say that, if they can handle a 45-minute drive there and back, would they rather sit in traffic or they would rather drive straight there and drive straight home? It just depends. But, say they buy a rural practice, they don't have to run it exactly the way the rural dentist ran it. If they want to go from 6:30 in the morning till 3 o'clock, 2 days a week, and they're home by 5 o'clock, they can do that. You own your business. You can make those changes. If you want to see your son's T-ball practice, on Wednesdays, don't work Wednesdays, work Fridays, or just go from, like I said, 6 a.m. to noon. So, that's what's great about dentistry is you can do it a little differently than other people, still be very profitable. You just got to weigh how many patients you're working on. Plus, Howard, I mean, there's great practices in the cities that have a ton of patients because they have a ton of relationships. It's not always just fighting over the same fish. It just depends, and that's part of the discernment a buyer's got to do to make sure it's the right fit for them.
One of the and by the right fit, remember, in religion, my two little sisters are nuns, so they believe in right and wrong. But when I got my MBA, they don't in economics. They believe in trade-offs. Everything has an advantage or a disadvantage. They don't believe, like, if you ask an economist which is better, an iPhone or an Android, well, they're not going to say, well, the Android's better or that. They're going to say, well, these are your trade-offs. And that. I mean, I couldn't believe, I don't want to offend you, but I couldn't believe when they fired Bobby Knight. I mean, I was like, really? Really? What was your next best idea? Just to burn down the basketball court? I mean, and they say, well, he threw a chair. It's like, well, I raised 4 boys. I'm sorry, but I don't know. Everybody has a different management style, right? So Bobby Knight wasn't right or wrong. I think he won a lot of championships. He might not have been your cup of tea, but you can't say he's wrong. I'll show you his championships. But one of the red flags that I see in the M&A activity is Wall Street. All they do is M&A activity. And whenever I noticed this clear back in the late 80s, whenever I met a doctor who did like $4 million a year by himself, they always had the M&A activity. They said, well, I came out here and there was a town of 5,000. It had 5 dentists because, again, there's a dentist for every 2,000 people, but in these small towns, the draw is as big as the city. So you're in a town of 10,000, it's got another 10,000 draw. So a dentist every 2,000, there's about a dentist for every 1,000. And I go there, and the smart ones are like, they were young, and they saw the old man getting ready to retire, and they'd started at 25, now they're 35, 65 is going to retire, and he's like, well, I don't want that old man. I mean, I enjoyed the fact that he was down to 3 days a week. And I enjoyed the fact that he didn't advertise. I enjoyed the fact he was just fading away. Like, who was it? MacArthur said, old soldiers never die. They just fade away. I've enjoyed this fade. I don't want him to sell it. Bring in some hyperactive 25-year-old that's doing the mayor and the advertising and Facebook and all that stuff. So they would just acquire that. So now the town went from 10 to 9. Right. And then 5, 6, 7 years later, he bought the other retiring guy. Now the town's got 7. So the town is growing because, the birth rate, there is a birth rate. That is one of America's strengths. I mean, America's birth rate is still growing fastly, whereas Japan and Spain will cut their populations in half by the end of the century. But, man, when you're in a town that's growing with babies and shrinking as dentists, they build some monster practices.
Yeah.
And then when your old man sells the practice and he tells everybody in this town, oh yeah, I could have sold to anybody, but old man John, this young kid is the best, and some of the staff stay, but when you show me a guy doing $4 million a year, it was M&A activity. Why does Wall Street know this at birth? And why does everybody in Manhattan know this? And why do dentists never even think of this? Why is M&A activity almost non-existent in dentistry?
Well, I think,
Or do you even agree with the question? I mean, is that...
No, I mean, I think a great way to grow a practice, is to merge in dentists who are looking to retire. I mean, I have a friend I talked to earlier today, who has a busy practice. He's going to do about 3 million this year, and he's like, how do I grow? And I've got associates that are working for me, and how do I grow? And, do I buy a practice, 20 miles away, 30 miles away? And I'm like, no, I think you stay in touch, with me. And if I have if I have dentists that are looking to sell nearby, you buy them, bring them on as staff, have them work for you for a year. And, all their patients matriculate over to you, and you can, take care of their people, and you got the blessing of them. And then maybe they work for a few years. Maybe they only work 1 day a week, whatever it may be. That's a great way to transition, Howard. And I think the biggest challenge is, you've got to make sure there's that relationship component of it. I mean, dentistry is a relationship business, which is great. I mean, that's one of the reasons, they're rebounding after this shutdown, is because it's a relationship business. It's different than medical. It's different than a lot of businesses. And those relationships matter. And any young dentist that's looking to do this, they really need to turn up their relationship IQ when they're talking to patients, because that's really what keeps them coming back, and you can grow a practice through that.
Okay, well, the follow-up of this, let me ask you this. Let me ask this a different way. So we have the DSOs all talking EBITDA, and that's EBITDA, earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. But these young kids, they if they're interested in business, they watch Shark Tank, and they know when they watch Shark Tank, who's the smartest guy on Shark Tank? Mr. Wonderful. It's always the bald guy in the room. It's never the guy with fancy hair like you. It's always the bald guy. Mr. Wonderful would say, well, what is your new customer acquisition cost? And so you're only making $5 on a customer, but it costs you $15 to get a customer. You're dead to me. So I go back to these dentists and say, okay, you can buy this practice, and here's the valuation based on EBITDA, but what is your new patient acquisition cost? And a lot of these dentists, they have to spend $150 on marketing to get a new person in their office. So I always want to see the EBITDA versus what is your new acquisition cost, because it makes sense to me that if I could buy your practice for $10 and you had 10 patients, but I could acquire a new patient for 50 cents, I could spend the $10 on marketing, get 20 new patients. And so I see their wheels running for 30 years, where they start saying, okay, you're selling your practice for this much money, it has this many active patients, and I want to know your definition of an active patient, versus just spend that money on direct mail, TV ads, and marketing. So how do you, because that would be a balanced approach. I mean, why do I buy all your patients if I can buy them through advertising?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think that any practice I always say, dentistry is never on cruise control. There's no cruise control in dentistry, right? You got to have your foot on the pedal. If you want to grow, you got to promote, you got to talk to people, you got to give referrals, you got to continue to, because people move, people leave, people make decisions to go elsewhere. You're not going to always have the same number of patients. So with this, I would think that most of my practices that have been purchased, the buyer sees the value in those relationships the dentist has with the patient. And you can do marketing and give away free whitening, free whatever it may be, and a lot of your patients are just going to come for that free whitening and go elsewhere. There's a number of patients that are just in for the free stuff, and that's it. I analyzing what's an active patient, you were going to ask me that. I think an active patient, somebody that's been in the practice in the last 18 months. Anybody that's been there in the
So,
last
so,
8.
so tell me what's wrong with my. You say that, and I know you say it. I probably know more about what you think than you know how I think. And but my old school way is just anybody that's scheduled. I mean, if you come in for a cleaning and we schedule for your next 6 months, if you're on the schedule, you're an active patient. But you put in that 18-month deal. Are those kind of the same numbers, or why do you like 18 months just versus are you scheduled or not? I mean, if you come in for a cleaning and you won't let us schedule your 6-month recall, I assume something's wrong.
Well, that's true. No, there's no doubt about it. I mean, but when you're really analyzing who's been through there, you got to really look at those emergency patients, if they've been in and they don't come back. So there's a lot of due diligence that goes into that by buyer's representatives. And, we're there to just give them the information. They can analyze what's best for the buyer. But, there's no doubt that I think that, you've got to do both. You've got to take care of your current patients, and you got to always have your foot on the gas to bring in new patients. I mean, obviously you've seen that in a lot of different areas.
I noticed you didn't comment on the Bobby Knight deal. Was that hitting too close to home?
No,
Did I give you an ulcer bringing up Bobby
no,
Knight?
I was in school when Bobby was coach, and we didn't lose a home game when I was there. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? They didn't lose a single home game when I was there.
So does that mean you wouldn't have fired him, or is that too controversial of a
Well, I
topic
don't
to
know.
say on a webinar?
Yeah, he did a lot of things that were, he definitely wouldn't last. And it was ego. Ego gets the best of people.
Yeah.
And he thought he was bigger than the university, so he probably, should have gone. He was a great coach, but it caught
I
up.
can't believe we went over an hour. I could talk to you 40 days and 40 nights, but I just have to ask you that I'm on the practice acquisitions boards on Dental Town, and every third question is like, well, do you think it's dumb to, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Is this not the time to buy or sell? And then you go to the marketing threads. Well, can you really market during a pandemic? So everybody, you go to the buying, selling a practice, marketing, even CE. They're like, they just the ADA canceled the ADA meeting in Florida this year. It's going to be virtual. So the bottom line is this really the time during a pandemic to be buying and selling a practice, or marketing or advertising? What should my homies be doing right now? Should they just sit there and like a deer staring into headlights and wait for this to pass? Or what could they be doing to be proactive during this time?
Well, I think to be proactive, I think they need to look at all opportunities. If you're talking about buyers, they need to really analyze and have that conversation. Again, this isn't anything. They're not buying a car, online or anything. They're buying relationships, and they need to really dive into that. And if they're in a situation where there doesn't feel like what's being represented, they need to ask the questions. And the sellers, if it's time for them to transition, they have relationships still. Just because the pandemic doesn't mean their patient relationships are any different. And it's an opportunity for that selling dentist to really raise their game. Like I said, they need to tell their staff and their patients that they're taking every step necessary to keep their patients safe. And they need to go through all those things to articulate that relationship. It's a relationship business. So, when they're looking at practices, I think they need to look at all options and weigh it and get good advisors around them. I don't think it's a one-person decision. I think it'd be very foolish for a dentist just to make a decision on their own. I think they need to surround themselves with good advisors, good dental advisors that understand dentistry. I think that's the best thing.
This is probably the most important question on this podcast right now, and that is partnerships. You know that when men and women get married, they make babies, they make love, they go on vacation. It's just a beautiful thing, right? And I wouldn't trade my 4 boys for anything. But when you marry another male dentist and you don't make love and have children and go on vacations, and they get divorced, and it's ugly. And like I say, a lot of people don't divorce. A lot of people don't fight with their ex on a lawyer deal because there's kids involved. You don't want to go to war with the mother of your children. But when it's just another male dentist, oh my God. I cannot. And then when I ask a lot of dentists, well, what would that were divorced and their partnership broke up? I say, well, what was worse, the divorce or the partnership breakup? They always say the divorce. So can I just categorically say, and will you sign off on it, that don't ever have a partner unless you have great sex with them? I mean, you can't marry another dentist. Do you not see, do you see a lot of these partnerships breaking up that just, like say I saw one the other day. The dentist sold half of his practice to a young dentist, got $650,000. A year or two later, they got divorced. I think he sold his half for $500,000. After 2 years, they got a divorce. He spent $600,000 in legal fees, and the judge said that he had to give her the $500,000 back.
Yeah, that's a mess.
What a mess. So
That's a
what
mess.
do you think causes dentists more trouble? Their marriage, children, and divorce, or marrying another dentist and having a partnership breakup? What's more common?
I can't say on the statistics, but I will say that it's important, if they're considering a partnership, that there's enough dentistry for both parties. Because if one dentist is knee deep in a difficult root canal and the other one's reading the paper, there's going to be some anger there, right? And they both get paid the same. So I think a lot of times where partnerships could go wrong is maybe they bring on a partner well before they can actually afford to have that partner. So, maybe the young partner is getting all the scraps and the senior partner is getting all the good stuff. And, again, it's all about expectations, like I said, a while back. And, we've got some different tools to analyze. I have a tool that shows if they actually are ready for a partner or ready for an associate. We've got some advanced things that can show them and give them a rating, on a scale from 0 to 100 if they're ready to actually do that. Because there's so many things that go into it. You can't have a 5-op practice that's doing, $900,000 in collections and expect to bring on a partner and have it succeed. You've got to add staff, you got to add equipment, you've got to add revenue, so everybody gets paid. So those are a lot of things that, too many times maybe it's a, shoot first, ask questions later scenario. They need to be more analytical before they add a partner. And if they do, they really need to take the time and make sure they talk through all the small things and the big things before they do that, because pretty good chance it's not going to work out if it starts bad.
Okay, someone posted this today on practice acquisitions on Dental Town, and you literally can't make this stuff up. I found a practice for sale. It's a bargain because the dentist died. He died. This is June or July 15th. He died in April. The question is, if someone died in April, so you got June, July, 2 months later. If after someone dies, how quickly does it lose value? He's been dead 2 months.
It's pretty dramatic, unless they have taken the steps to, if they have friends in the community that'll cover for them and keep the hygiene going, and if they have dentist friends that work.
Actually, the dentist was killed by the hygienist. She killed him. No. Oh, I think I read that wrong. Okay, it was a heart attack.
You may have read that wrong.
I might have read that wrong. I just assumed the hygienist killed him.
Yeah, that'd be pretty tragic. But we actually we just last November we came out with a new process. It's here's a book on it. It's called the Practice Optimizer Experience. And
why don't you make that an online CE course?
I'd be happy to.
My God, we go ahead. But anyway, the online is everything.
Yeah, well, and this is essentially when we meet with clients that are 3 to 5 years away from wanting to retire or thinking they can retire, we address that very thing. What happens if you pass away? We make sure that your spouse can actually transition your practice. We list the people that you would want us to contact to help keep your practice going. You could list the people that you wouldn't want to sell to in your community, and we get them connected to attorneys. We also do an assessment on their insurances that they're in and maybe give them some suggestions through a partner of ours on other insurances to get in. We do the analysis on the opportunity in the practice. We give a valuation, And basically, we're preparing them for a future sale, and hopefully, that we can get them there. We can get them to that 5 years where their value is higher. They're protected. We know what's going on. And in a worst case scenario, they do die. We can grab this binder off their shelf and they're already ready to go. Their spouse can transition quickly. We can contact the necessary people. We have a value in place and we can get to work. It's extremely difficult to do my job with as much due diligence we do in advance after the dentist is gone, because we don't know them. We can't tell their story because they're gone. And a lot of times the spouse isn't aware of what goes on in the practice, and we're able to isolate all that opportunity on the front end. And we have a connection with a financial advisor that can kind of give them a scope of if they are financially ready to retire as a second opinion for their investment advisor. So all that's included in this.
And what's the name of that manual?
It's called the Practice Optimizer Experience. We just launched it in November, and we're just starting to roll it out.
We put up 400 one-hour courses on Dentaltown. They've been viewed over 1 million times. Because and I asked them, well, what is the deal? And because some of them are even older courses, they say, well, I don't want to go down to the Pankey Institute for a week. I'd rather watch the 1 hour online course by the Pankey Institute. So they made a course. The Dawson, the Pankey, all these. So it kind of what it kind of does, it kind of disintermediates sell. It's kind of like when you look on TV and they want to sell you a reverse annuity on a home. Well, you can't explain that on a 30-second commercial. So they disintermediate the sales process and the commercials just to try to get you to get the CD. And then the CD's like, well, if you don't call Thad, he can't even tell you the number. Just call Thad and give me your addresses, so at least you know what you're talking about. And then so the qualified lead, they finally comes. But I think if you did that manual, they'd get a chance to meet you, build some trust, get a relationship going. And then, and I know we've gone over an hour, and you're...
No, that's great. I appreciate the tip, Howard.
Then the next question they're going to ask over and over and over, you're talking about this evaluation, and we talked about EBITDA, we talked about your comprehensive deal, but a lot of them are obsessed with demographics. They're like, well, I don't care how you evaluate it, this demographic, this area is growing, this one's shrinking. Do demographics matter?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. I think that's just all part of the due diligence they need to do, in looking at things. If all the factories are leaving the town you're going to buy in, you're not going to get the return that you deserve. And, that's part of, like I said, for a young buyer, they need to take their time. They need to get to know the dentist. They don't, when I was a general manager for Patterson, I read a book once where it talked about, if you're going to interview somebody, you should interview them 3 different times in 3 different places. Just because you never know, somebody might be on their game the first time you interview them, and you get spooked and you realize they're not the best candidate. I think buyers should do the same thing. After we sit down with the buyer and seller, I always encourage the buyer to sit down with the seller in a more relaxed setting, maybe at their home or go to dinner, with their spouse and get to know them, because it's a relationship.
It's funny you say that, because what you just said made me think of the most horrific time. When someone calls me up and they're crying to where I can't even understand what they're saying, it's because this buying selling deal is daughter buying mom's practice. It's like, okay, I'll ask you this question. This might be too embarrassing, but did you sign a prenuptial with your wife before you married her?
No.
No, either did I. So her mom said all this stuff. Well, yeah, come with me, and I'm getting ready to sell. And she worked there 5 years. She graduated with her mom. It was doing $500,000 a year, and she brought social media and this and Spunk, and they built it up to $1 million. And then her mom goes and says, "Oh, my practice worth $1 million, and my daughter's gonna buy it from me for $1 million." And then she's like, "Mom, And anyway, I have seen more emotional trauma of buying and selling a practice between son and dad, daughter
Absolutely.
and dad, daughter and mom. Gosh darn, can you save one of my homies who, I know one dentist here in town that did not go see his father for Thanksgiving or Christmas for 10 years after the practice transition. That's how bad it was. So to all the young kids watching that just assume they'll always go home for Thanksgiving, Well, I mean, you know what the judge is going to say. You know what Judge Wapner is going to say. Can I see your receipt? Oh, we didn't write anything down. There was no prenuptial agreement. There was nothing.
Right.
It was just dad and his son fishing, and oh my God, it goes south so fast. Will you give some parenting advice on buying and selling between father and son and mother
Oh
and
yeah,
daughter?
it's a challenge, and honestly, it's for all of our sellers. I mean, part of our role, at DDS Match Professional, we're working through the emotions of what's happening here. I mean, this is, like I said, being a relationship business. Most of our dentists that we work with truly care on what happens. There's very few that are like, I don't care, just get it done, right? But a high majority, really care about who it is, what it looks like, how it plays out. So part of our role is financial, but it's also emotional. And that's why we want to do it right. That's why, because if we do it right, they're going to tell their 10 guys that they went to dental school with, guys and girls they went to dental school with, and say, hey, you need to work with Thad, or you need to work with Ed, or you need to work with Joe when you are, looking to transition your practice. I mean, that's how we grow. We grow through referrals, great referrals from dentists we've worked with. And if we can have happy customers, then we're going to continue to
And
grow.
let me give you an example of how it's really emotional. Like dentists, they can be emotional because technically we're humans, and a biologist would say we're humans. I don't know if accountants would or lawyers or that. But my gosh, the new dentist comes in and says, "Well, doc, Thad, before you sold, you did this crown and it doesn't fit. I'm going to redo the crown and you're going to pay me for it." It's not even the $1,000. It's the fact that you just said his crown wasn't perfect.
Right.
I don't get sued because when they want their money back, I give it to them. And associates, when they come in and do dentistry and then they leave and 3 years later an implant fails, I'm not even going to get involved because my buddy did it, whatever. I just send it to the my friends, and they'll redo it and pay the bill because that old quote with who was that who said that quote um who was it that said it was Charlie Sheen. The judge said to him, he says, "Charlie, why were you even buying a prostitute? You could get any girl you want." And she goes, you buy a prostitute because what you're paying for is for them to leave. That's what a patient refund is. It's not right or wrong. It just, you'll leave. This is over the minute I give you money back. So the question is, you sold me the practice, and then it sounds like the young dentist is trying to get all his money back by finding something wrong with every piece of dentistry I did in the last 5 years and is redoing everything. And again, it's the emotional thing. It's just that this old dentist who was fading away is the last taste in his mouth is that all of his dentistry sucked and he was paying to have it redone. How do you deal with that emotionally?
Well, I mean, I think it's important, like I said, and when a buyer is looking at a practice, if they have a good advisor, they're going to take some time to really look through the charts. They're going to look through the x-rays. They're going to figure out, is this dentist, a good dentist or not? They can take 50 random charts and look through them. I mean, that's part of the due diligence I want buyers to use to see what they're buying. But, I caution buyers for, um, you know, they need to look at the macro when they're in there. If they get a filling that falls out or a crown that pops off, periodically, I think they need to really analyze how they respond to that. Because if they say, oh, well, this is terrible, I'm just going to redo all this because the old dentist didn't do a very good job, that really takes away the integrity of the whole experience that the patient had. So, I think you got to really, analyze first and look at as many opportunities that make sense. And then make sure, like I said, get a good team around you that can really tell you, is this good or bad, as they consider, purchasing a practice.
Last but not least, final question. It looks like the ADA is getting into this space. Looks like they're starting a practice transition. Did you see that?
I did. Yeah. Yeah. I think we're
When
doing
did
a
that
couple.
start, and what did you think
I
when you
think
saw
it,
that? Because you're
well,
close to the ADA. You're it's just Indianapolis, in my mind. Living out here, it's
sure.
Indianapolis, Notre Dame, Chicago ADA building.
Sure.
Is that the
Sure.
same
Right there.
road?
Yeah. Similar. Well, I think they're looking to bring some value to their members. And, I think the hardest part of doing this is this is an intimate transaction, and it's, we're DDS Match, we have a website. I created a website, but it's all about the relationships. The website helps us find the opportunities, but when our professionals work with their clients and with young buyers and their advisors, it's not just a website that gets it done, and it has everything to do with, what's going on. Let's do the due diligence, and then once we get to that offer stage, let's be comprehensive in what's in the offer. Like I said, it's not just the price, it's not just the timing. There's so many things that go into that. My clients, I want them to feel confident to move towards closing with the understanding the entire deal, and I want the buyers to feel the same way.
So, last question: what do they need to do? My 30-year anniversary of lecturing is August 4th, 1990. I've been on tour for 30 years, and every break you say, does anybody have any questions? No. Okay, well, let's take a 15-minute break. Then 20 people run up to you with their special question. You know what I mean? I know my dentists. They're shy. They're introverts. All that kind of stuff. And they all have a special question.
Sure.
Everybody listening to this has a special question. Where do they go for that special question? They just go to DDS Match and then click. Yeah. Like if I click Arizona, my Arizona guy, and go to him, is there an email? What do you recommend?
I would recommend first create a profile. It's free. DDS Match is never a charge.
Can I just move my Match.com profile to DDS Match, or do you have
And obviously, if they're employed and they don't want to be seen on the website, they don't have to put their picture on the website. None of their information is public. But in doing that, you can search for opportunities. You can pick on desired locations. You can talk about yourself on who you are. And a lot of times our sellers will go, hey, I saw this person on your site. I'd like to meet that person. But, it's a method to connect. You set up a free profile. We also have what's called the Dds Match Academy, which is a spot where there's a lot of information on what goes into it.
That's a different website?
Same website.
Okay, same website.
Match, but it's a number of blogs and different in the financial, in the accounting, in the banking and management, legal. A lot of questions by advisors we work with, attorneys, accountants, bankers, on what to consider when you're considering buying a practice. It's all there on the DDS Match Academy. This, again, is free of charge. It's a great resource to find opportunities, and I think it starts there. And obviously, if anybody has any direct questions for me, you can email me at tmiller@ddsmatch.com. I'm happy to answer your questions. I'm happy to get you connected to who your representative is in your market. It's pretty easy to find out who your representative is, but when you click on a practice that you're interested in, it gets sent to that representative to follow up with you on additional details.
Well, I'll tell you what, it was just an honor to have you come on to the show today. You answered so many questions. You stayed for overtime. Thank you so much.
Howard, it's an honor to be on here. You are incredible for dentistry, and I appreciate all the information you put out for people. I greatly appreciate it, and I'd be happy to do it anytime.
Okay, but am I the Bobby Knight of dentistry?
Well, let's just say you've got some national championships, but you haven't thrown any chairs or choked anybody.
Oh,
right?
my God. Okay. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. Have a rocking hot day, and good luck with those three boys teaching them golf.
Hey, thanks a lot, Howard. Take care. Same with your family.
All right. Bye-bye.